lose them if they back up for long. I want to go to Kings because this is one of my favorite places. My printer wouldn't work last night, so I had to call somebody in the middle of the night to talk me through it. A 13-year-old knows more about that stuff than I do. Amen. You got any problems with your computers, you can't figure out how it works? Call your 7-year-old. In 1 Kings 3, verse 16 says, "Then came there 2 women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house." What y'all doing to the baby? "And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered," the 3rd day, "that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while thine handmaiden slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear. And the woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, the one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other said, Nay, but thy son is dead, and my son is living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in 2, and give half to the one, half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon for her son. And she said, O my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king. For they say that wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. I want you to look at somebody and say, We're searching for natural affection. Look at somebody else and say, The real mother. Ooh. Maybe we ought to ask a question. Look at your neighbor and say, Who is the real mother? I approach it from a negative. And the negative is actually based in Timothy, where Paul talks to Timothy about the last days. And it is interesting that we would happen to be in the last days, and the application of what he said to Timothy is quite apropos as it relates to you and I. He says to Timothy in a series of things that will take place in the last days, that one of the things will be without natural affection. It is interesting, before I begin to define natural affection, it is interesting that human beings are made up of more than eros. People will have sex with you and and don't have any affection for you. Am I talking to some grown people in here? Because it seems to me that we have become so cold towards each other. I was talking to somebody in Jamaica, and they told me that a man stabbed his 2-year-old daughter. And it was something that was incomprehensible to me, because I couldn't grasp in my mind at all how anybody could stab their own 2-year-old child. They took him to the police station, of course, and the next day they found him riddled with bullets because the cop said he was trying to escape. But when they considered the atrocity and the horrendous wickedness of his behavior, you knew it was going to happen. People are so indifferent and so cold. And you wonder in your own heart, how can we be so callous as it relates to one another? Somebody will take your life over $10, and people will drive by and shoot and don't even know who they're shooting. They're telling me now 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds are dying all over our country because there is an struggle, and that is that man has lost his natural affection. Ooh. When he said without natural affection, it is storgos. And this is the Greek denoting natural affection with alpha. Anytime you put alpha, it's the prefix which negates the meaning. I found a quote from Benjamin Warfield, and Benjamin Warfield says, and I quote, he says, natural affection is actually that abiding feeling on a subject. This is getting a little difficult up here. Is abiding a feeling within us, which when resting on an object as near to us, it recognizes we are closely bound up with it and takes satisfaction in its recognition. Unquote. He's saying simply is that love has a natural move of the soul, something almost like gravitation or some other force of blind nature. And that is that when you have natural affection, you enjoy the presence of somebody or object that is near you that immediately pulls you like gravity. I'm sure you have experience looking at your nieces and feeling love for your children. Just automatically, just responding to their smallest cry and wondering how they're doing when they're off in school. I mean, just sitting around wondering. And how you come alive when they show up. It's like a blind force of nature. You just wake up one day and the child is told that it's yours, and all of a sudden you just love it. It's just natural. You don't have to work it up. You don't have to ply it up. You don't have to get injections for it. It just comes natural out of you. Here comes my niece. Here comes my son. here comes my daughter. You just look at your kids, and all of a sudden you just feel something flowing through you. And it's just natural. It's not a moral thing. It's not scientific. It's not intellectual. It's just that you're gravitating towards something that is close to you. This then is the love of parents for children. And it is the love of children for parents. It's the kind of feeling you have for a wife and the kind of feeling a wife has for a husband. It is not obligatoriness. It has nothing to do with that, because the term used is not used in a moral sense. It's used in a natural sense. Anybody who can't feel naturally towards those who are bound to them and who are close to them, anybody who can't feel anything like that is unnatural. Because it goes against the norm of the human psyche. When your child comes around and you feel like they are a problem and see them as some kind of difficulty and as some hindrance to your program. Anything that offsprings and comes from you, it is natural. And so it is a necessity under the circumstance, because this is the binding factor by which any natural or social unit is held together. I want you to consider, and I'm going to stretch it a little bit, I want you to consider Salome. And Salome is the wife of Zebedee. Do you remember the story of Zebedee, the great fisherman, and Salome had two sons? The best she had two sons, and one's name was John, and the other's name was James. If you notice, John and James, they were with Jesus all the time. And whenever he was going to do something special, like the Mount of Transfiguration or in Gethsemane, you will always see the names Peter, James, and John. Now, can you imagine how privileged a mother would be if she had two sons with Jesus when no one else had two sons with Jesus? Can you imagine her sitting around at the tea party with the girls and talking about my two sons are with Jesus? Nobody else has two sons, but my two are with Jesus. It is obvious that her lifestyle was significant enough to cause them to want to be with Jesus. If you remember when he was crucified, when all of the guys were gone, when all of the, the macho guys were gone, the Bible says that she followed afar off. And the reason she probably followed afar off was because of the boisterous crowd, and she couldn't get near because she would. She was a devoted woman, and her lifestyle prepared her sons to follow Jesus. Who else had two sons as disciples? I mean, really, what a privilege all by itself. But she wanted more for her sons. You got to understand where I'm going here. Anybody who has sons and daughters and they're natural, they want more for them. You would want them to be better than you are. You would want them to achieve more than you have achieved. Nobody wants to bring anybody into the world and then spend time trying to keep them back. That's why it's difficult when you're around a family who wants to restrict who you can and should become. And it's really sad that the greatest upbringing and the greatest springing comes from those who are closest to you, because they have the greatest influence in your life. It starts in the home. That's where it starts. It starts in the home. And it doesn't matter whether you were born poor, Because being born poor is not a requisite for failure. A requisite for failure is not being born poor. Hear me. Because a whole lot of folk came in here with nothing and ended up with a whole lot of something because they simply were raised right. You're quiet, but I'm going to preach anyhow. It's significant because the worst thing you can do to anybody is not to raise them right. Because if I'm raised right, I can overcome any circumstance that rises in my life. Let me tell you this. I did not know that I was poor until I got rich. I wish I could talk to you about that. I absolutely did not know that I was poor growing up. Because, you know, I had a maid, yes, and all of that kind of stuff. But because I was in a more elite group in Jamaica didn't mean that I had anything. You understand what I'm saying? Because you can have the kind of upbringing that isolates you from the circumstances to the point where you don't feel the pressure of what's going on around you because somebody above you is taking the buffet. You see, that's what parents do. They block for their children so that their children are having a good time in the cab, but the mother and father are the shock absorbers going over the difficulties of life. So as they drive over the road of difficulties, the wheels are bumping up and down, but the cab is running smooth because God put you in the cab, put your mother on the ground to keep you from feeling the bumps. So only when you have to take care of yourself do you find out how to give praise for the folk who took care of you until you had to take care of yourself. I feel like preaching. I didn't know. I didn't come to talk today and walk around. I come to holler and sit down no matter how I feel. She asked Jesus. Now she wanted more for them because she was so nationalistic in her disposition, as many others were. Here's what she asked Jesus, and I quote the scriptures. She says, "Grant that these my two sons may sit the one on the right hand and the other on the left in the kingdom," unquote. Now that was her demand. And it was born out of maternal pride and jealousy. She didn't want anybody else in the seat beside him but their two sons. It didn't arise from true faith. She was just zealous for her boys. If they're with you, Lord, then I want you to elevate them to your left and your right. But she had no clue what she was asking. Now notice in his rebuke, Jesus did not try to hurt her feelings, and he certainly didn't deny her request. He simply corrected it. And here's what he said. He said in a way that the mother and sons did not anticipate. He didn't treat her ambition as for her sons as sinful, because he understands that every mother will get down in the trenches for her children, and every mother will fight for their rights. Oh God, I feel like preaching here. How many times have your mother just come down to the school and just went off because she thought somebody had mistreated you, and what she didn't know that you were the one mistreating the other folk? Fella said to me, his mother said, "Stop keeping bad company," but she didn't know he was the bad company. Jesus didn't treat it as sinful, her ambition for her sons. He didn't think it was sinful, but he was compassionate because of the request, her ignorance in the request. Because here's what he told her. He said, now if they're going to be intimately near me on the throne, they have to suffer what I suffer. And so even though you have a request to elevate them, you better be more intelligent about what you asked me to do. You see, he did not rebuke her because of her ambition for her sons, because it's a natural thing for you to be ambitious about your children. It's a natural thing for you to want them to scale the heights. My number one fan is my mother, and that is a blessing to me because she'll go anywhere I go at any time if she can. And anytime you look over and see your mother, I guarantee you'll preach. He understood the natural affection. Then Paul is saying to us now that in the last days we're going to lose the natural affection. And that's where we're living now, where people will look at you as if you're a piece of dirt, and people will treat you like you're a nobody. And much of that is coming from the way they were raised. They came up in a cold house. How do you expect them to be warm? And God help you if you fall in love with somebody that's cold because they're good looking and they're debonair and they're suave and they've got a little swagger to them on the outside. But if they have no natural affection, that house is going to be hell itself. I feel it here. Now the text tells me that motherhood is proven in the most obscure place. The quality of motherhood is not limited to the profession. Can I say that again? It doesn't matter what the profession is. It does not limit the quality of motherhood. And this is what the text says. It reminds us that the demands of motherhood removes all scruples. There is a mother that'll do anything to take care of a child. There is a mother who will break all the moral rules and all of the dignified rules to do something for their child. There is a mother that will go up a pole in the middle of the night in order to supply for a child that's at home. Now, you can look like Alice in Wonderland if you want to, but the truth is there is a mother that will do anything in order to take care of a child. Profession does not limit the significance of motherhood. You cannot judge the quality of a mother by whether she's on a pole or in a lawyer's office, because the lawyer's office doesn't make her a better mother than the woman that's dancing every night on the pole. I feel like preaching today. The truth is still the truth. It's a significant thing because oftentimes we judge the value or the quality of people by their profession. But I have seen that you can have a marvelous profession and still be a terrible person. And you just can't judge people by whether they're called doctor or lawyer or whether they're walking the street. There are some people who will do anything that they have to do in order to take care of their offspring. And some folk aren't going to sit around and beg you to take care of what's theirs. They're going to do whatever it takes to take care of what's theirs. The power of motherhood, direct proportion to the self-sacrifice, a gift from the character of God. So the question now becomes, what is the king? Why is the king handling the matter? And I studied enough to find out that Eastern monarchs, who generally administer justice in person, they don't allow somebody else to take it, but they take the extremely hard cases where no one could sift through the conflicting evidence. The monarch comes out. It's interesting because I told them to give me Solomon's prayer, and here's what Solomon prayed. He said, "Thou hast showed unto thy servant David my father great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee, and thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to set on his throne. As it is this day and now, O Lord my God, instead of David my father, and I am but a little child, I don't know how to go out or to come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered and counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart, that I may judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this thy so great a people. You gotta understand this as a parent, as a leader. There is no manual that comes with raising a child. Oh yes, there's a manual that comes with a Cadillac, with a Mercedes Benz. Yes, there's a manual that comes with a TV. I got a blood pressure machine last night, and if they thought I was going to read all of that stuff, they had something else coming. I had to go the shortcut. You see, manuals come with everything. But the most important thing in the world is a human being. And manuals don't come with your children. But I know somebody who can give you enough wisdom to raise your child. Anytime that child comes out in that hospital room, as soon as you can, get on your knees, because this is going to be the fight of your life. And you better call on God and say, Lord, I'm not but a little child. Give me wisdom that I may judge in this household, so that everybody in here will be blessed. Because if you don't, can I preach like I feel it? You know, sometimes I deal with relationships, and people feel like you ought to understand them, and you ought to be able to get along with them, and people you just barely met, and next thing you know, you're trying to get close, and they think it ought to just flow. And it comes to me many times, and it seems a little funny, but it comes to me that I wasn't raised to be with you. I wasn't raised. I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know I'd meet you when I was 25. I wasn't raised to be with you. So because we have a little trauma here and a little stress, and because things aren't going as smoothly as you thought they ought to go, I wasn't raised to be with you. I didn't learn anything about you. I'm just trying to find you out now. And sometimes you say, well, I didn't know you were like that, but I didn't know either. I'm just finding it out when you're finding it out. I mean, it just wasn't made like that. And then I thought that we raise our children. They come in here blank, pretty much blank. And we raise them, and when they get 17, we don't like them. I wish somebody'd hear me. We don't want him around. Is Junior coming? No, he can't come over here. You see what I'm saying? It's a difficult thing. So you need to get down on your knees, touch and agree with the father, or touch and agree with whoever the baby belongs to. And if they won't touch and agree with whoever will touch and agree, and say, Lord, give me wisdom that I might handle this life, so that 20, 30 years from now, they're not sitting somewhere on a corner with the police got them strapped up, beating them down. I come by a while ago, it's 4 cruisers out there trying to handle one person, and I'm saying to myself, something went radically wrong in the life of an individual that cannot be sober enough to operate on a day-to-day basis. Solomon asked for wisdom, and all of us need wisdom to deal with one another. Have I told you, touch your neighbor? Yet it's coming. And so now there are harlots, the 2 harlots from the Hebrew world, Gadish, and they were temple harlots, and it's not applicable here because there is no religious implication, there is no religious association with these words. The word here is used is zina, and it simply means to commit fornication. A harlot, then, interesting that the secondary root for this word is anger. It's interesting now that zina, the initial word is to commit fornication. But the secondary word is anger. And you can understand now that a woman who is giving herself and giving herself to men simply because she has to, sooner or later gets angry because she does not want to give herself without a relationship that's meaningful. I wish I could talk to you here Sunday morning being streamed. You see, when a woman goes and she has any kind of training, whenever she goes with you, she wants you to be the last one. She does not want to have a list of names that she's been with. See, a man can brag about how many women he's been with, and his buddies say, "Go on, man, you's a bad man." But a woman can't even tell her best friend how many men she's been with, or they start calling her names. Can I preach it, or should I leave it alone? The text is really before me, and the truth is, a man can walk in here. One of my friends is 89, and he married a 49-year-old woman. Now you tell me, if an 89-year-old woman walked in here with a 49-year-old man, we gonna all have something to say. But we say to him, "You're a bad man." But we say to her, "What in the world are you doing?" You see, anger becomes a part of the relationship between men and women, particularly if a woman feels like she's being used and abused. It brings anger. So the etymologist sees no connection, but sometimes there is anger in what you feel you have to do. I wish I hadn't had to do this. I wish somebody would take care of me, particularly in that society, because the woman in the Hebrew society could not have a job. She left her father's house and she went to her husband's house, and if she couldn't get into anybody's house, she had to take care of herself. So it literally means to commit illicit heterosexual intercourse. So the harlot then receives hire and has identifying marks, which is another problem why I can see anger. So she can't mix with all the other women because she's got a mark that identifies her particular trade. Now they normally had their own homes because they were usually shunned, and they definitely did not want to be in the gate before the king, because now they're out in the public and everybody's listening to their business, and they surely didn't want to be sitting in an open court with the king sitting out there. Solomon's wisdom is being highlighted. They're not really wanting to talk about the harlots, they just want to talk about his wisdom. Nevertheless, the natural instincts of one is greater than the natural instincts of the other, because his case of judgment can only be based on whether or not he can decipher by the disposition of the women whose baby it really is, because nobody was in the house, so they didn't have a witness. So it's one person's word against another. And so now what Solomon is saying in his spirit is, can I trust and can I find some natural affection? I gotta find something natural here. Now the question becomes, why would any harlot want to have a child? And the answer is because they're getting old, and as they're getting old, they're going to need somebody to take care of them, because nobody's going to an old harlot when they can go to a young one. And they can't have daughters because daughters can't help them, because daughters can't work. Are you listening to me here? You see, daughters daughters can't help them because daughters cannot work, because they themselves would have to take the same trade because they don't have a father that they can identify. So now the sons become gold. To have a son, man, is the best thing that could happen to them as they get older. Now one woman is too careless because she now just rolls over on her child because she isn't feeling the child. Because anytime you're sleeping with a child, you have to feel the child. Nobody's sleeping with a little baby, because I wouldn't have it in my house. I put that boy in a crib soon as he was born. Put him in a crib. I'm not going to have him between us and I roll over and sock him in his head while he's 2 months old or a month old. He went straight to the crib. Right in the crib. Immediately when he showed up, he went to the crib. Oh yes, because I wasn't going to have it. And truly, and understand this, that's why Paul said perilous times will come, for men shall be lovers of themselves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemous, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. And you need to touch your neighbor and say, the time is upon us. Yes, the time is upon us. Dangerous times when people have no feeling for one another. Evil times when people don't care about you. Evil times where folk will take you out in a minute. You better not say something to somebody who said something to you. Just keep on walking. Just keep on walking. Pull on somebody and say, your life is too valuable to allow somebody to take you out over pride. I feel the Holy Ghost in here, Pat. I'm almost ready. Give somebody a high five and said, where is the real mother? Oh yeah. Oh, I feel it here. You can understand then the difficulty she's feeling, because now one woman knows this is my child, and I imagine that's as instinctive. It's not an intellectual feeling here, it's an instinctive feeling that this is my child. And the woman rolls over in the night because she wants to make sure she has a retirement program. So she kills her child in the night, and while the other woman is sleeping, she changes the children. Now notice, if you will, she wakes up and the scripture says she considered. And I just believe the Holy Spirit helped her to understand that this is not your child that's dead. You see, some people have dead children because they roll over them. I got to preach it. I might as well. I'll call security if I need it. They got to roll over them. And many times we roll over our children and we suffocate our kids and we don't allow them the freedom to be who they are. So consequently, they don't become anything because we rolled over them. There's a child that's rolled over, and there's a child that's released. There's a child that's limited, and a child that has all possibilities. And it all begins in the home, because the home can break you or the home can make you. You can have somebody in the house who will not enable you not to be something, because many times the difficulties we have come from enablers. You're going to enable me to be great, or you're going to enable me to be nothing. Can I preach like I feel it? I'm looking at many of our stars who are dying young. and I'm asking myself, how can you be worth 300 million and 400 million and die and never enjoy it? Because you got a group of folk around you who do whatever you want to do. I wish I could preach it, but I hope there is a mother in here who will look at a child and say, you will not do whatever you want to do, because I'm not trying to be your buddy. I'm trying to be your... I feel a breakthrough coming. Can I get a little help somewhere? I feel the Holy Ghost in here. I don't need anybody around me that helps me to do what I shouldn't do and sit around quiet. Can I preach like I feel it? And make sure I have the thing waiting that ain't no good for me. I need somebody around me to look me in the face and say, son, that's not what you're supposed to do. God didn't raise you up for you to be a chump, and God didn't raise you up for you to have stuff that you can't even enjoy because of your bad habits. Give somebody a high five. So we have too many enablers to do the wrong thing. I need a mama that'll stand up and say, not in this house, not with my money, not with my car, not with my friends. You're gonna do what you're supposed to do, or out. Get out if you can't do right. That's what we need. But some of us roll over our kids. How can a 14-year-old run anybody's house? How can a 15-year-old dictate the atmosphere of the house? You just rolled over. I feel like preaching. You just rolled over and let the child decide. What do you want to do, baby? What do you want to eat, baby? Where do you want me to take you, baby? The devil is a liar. Get in the car with me. You going where I'm going. I ain't changing no lifestyle for you. I feel like preaching. What am I going to give up so you can be crazy? If you want to go to jail, that's your business. I'm not putting my house up. I'm not going to roll over and put my house up to get bail money to get you out. You going to stay there till we go to court. I feel like preaching in here. I feel like lifting him up. If you don't raise him right, you'll be on a fixed income, mama, and they'll be borrowing your money. You 80 years old, lending money to a 40-year-old who's got muscles this big. You rolled over. That's what you did. You rolled over and let him be anything he want to be. Taking your money, sneaking your money for drugs, rolling in your house in the midnight hour, sitting in a house. I feel like preaching. I feel like going crazy. Living in your house, sneaking a woman in. If you got to have a woman, man, you ought to have your own place. Why you sneaking some woman? And you got to be a crazy woman to be sneaking up in some house. I feel like preaching. I feel like lifting him up. Give somebody a high five and say something must be wrong. When a man can say to a woman, come on in here quietly, honey. Don't make no noise now. Mama is in the other room now. Something got to be wrong because you rolled over. Cut somebody and say, quit rolling over and stand up on your own 2 feet and let your children know I'm mama in this house. I run this place. And if you coming up in here, you got to come up here right. You ain't sneaking no woman up in my house. You ain't taking no woman to some back room. The devil devil is a liar. And I don't want to smell no ganja cigarette coming out of my room. If you want to smoke it, get you a house. If you want to smoke it, get you a place. But I ain't rolling over. The devil is a liar. You ain't putting no drugs in my refrigerator. No, you ain't. If you want to serve drugs and sell drugs, get you a place. But get out of my house, you 40-year-old. Ain't never worked a job because I rolled over. But I'm standing up today and I'm telling the world, the devil is a liar. I feel like preaching. That's why it was so easy for her to say, cut him in two. Cut him in two. Because if you don't give birth to something, it don't mean anything to you. But when you give birth, it means something to you. Real mama said, that's my son. Don't cut him in two. Real mama said, that's my child. And he's got a future. Real mama says, if he won't take care of me, I still want him to live. Real mama say, give him to her. Let him live. Real mama wants you to live not on the basement but in the ceiling, in the penthouse. Real mama will go to God and say, bring my child to another level. Real mama will tell the devil, get out of my house, get off of my child, get out of my spirit, get out. Get out. A real mama is a praying woman that can touch the throne of God. Y'all excuse me. Give somebody a high five and say, a real mama will bring you out by calling on the name of the Lord. Many of us are here because of our mothers. Many of us are here because they prayed us through, prayed us out of the club, prayed us off of drugs, prayed us off of alcohol, prayed us off of all kinds of mess, prayed us out of jail. Talk to me, somebody. Real mamas will lay on their stomachs and call on God for their children. Real mamas want you to live. Somebody celebrate. Celebrate your mama. Oh yeah. Let her have it. Let her have it. But don't cut him in two. Let her have it. Let him live. If I don't get another dime, if I don't get another trick, let him live. Let him live. Because he's my child. And if I see him in the street, I'm still glad he's alive because he's my child. It's an incredible truth, particularly in our ethnicity that is maternally driven, that if we didn't have our mothers, where would we to everyone who understands, and particularly successful men who couldn't find their fathers, they owe so much. And while she was raising them from a vertical position, she was fighting so many horizontal. Some mamas had to fight fathers to raise their children. Some mamas were put down by fathers and still raise their children above his level. Mothers have been an incredible tool that God has used. Can I say it like I'm feeling it in my heart? God has used mothers more than he's used preachers. Because if the mother did the right thing, the preacher's job is negated. Oh, hear me when I tell you. Because nobody nourishes like mothers. I want you to celebrate your mother before we pray.